Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Get Real with Stacie and Kendra. I'm Stacie. I am here by myself today because Kendra had some family obligations. So today it's just me, and I have been on a break for a few weeks. We took a 10-day RV trip through Colorado and Utah. I was mostly off grid and it was amazing. Highly recommend going off grid if you can. And I say off grid, we were not totally off grid, but I was out of pocket. I was not on my computer. And for me, that was a huge win because it has been years since I haven't taken my computer with me on vacation. So I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I've had a little bit of a challenging time getting back to it, getting back to all of the things that we do in life between having 3 kids and my own business. But here I am. Today, I'm really going to focus on the best diet for inflammation in the body, because as a holistic health practitioner, most of my clients come to me with symptoms of inflammation in the body. Inflammation is at the root of pretty much all chronic diseases that we deal with. And so it's not something that many people avoid unless they are paying attention and being very intentional with the lifestyle choices that they make. So I want to talk a little bit about diet today, but let's just start off with what is inflammation? What causes inflammation? Inflammation is a natural response from the body to injury. So we need inflammation. It's healthy. It's what facilitates wound healing. It's just how our bodies heal themselves. But there's a point where that inflammation can get out of control. And that's where we end up with problems. Chronic inflammation can lead to things like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and any numerous autoimmune conditions. Now, what causes that inflammation? Well, it's hard to know for sure. In today's world, we've got so many variables that are at play when it comes to our health and our inflammation. I would argue that poor quality nutrition is one of the root causes. We are living off of food products. Most of us are eating the SAD, or the standard American diet. And so we're not getting all of the nutrients that our bodies really need. And let me just tell you, our bodies need nutrients. The other piece there is that a lot of us are actually focused on dieting all the time. We're focused on restriction. We're focused on not fueling our bodies. And so we miss out on a lot of nutrition. So I would say poor quality nutrition is one piece to that inflammation puzzle. But you've also got environmental factors. You have exposure to things like mold, which could be natural, but could be anywhere. You've got exposure to all kinds of toxins in the air and in the water. And, things just are not as natural as they once were. And even just sitting in my bedroom, in my office, I'm surrounded by things that are probably off-gassing. And so we've got these environmental factors that will affect us, will contribute to inflammation if our bodies are not able to handle that. You also have the stress and lack of sleep, and that really contributes to our bodies not being able to handle things like environmental toxins and poor food. Our bodies have a natural detoxification process. So anytime we talk about detox diets, our bodies do that naturally, but we have to put our bodies under the right conditions and in the right environment in order for our bodies to really naturally detoxify. So if we are not getting good sleep and if we are under stress, our bodies are going to be impaired, and that detoxification is going to be impaired. And that's when we end up with inflammation. And then finally, I would suggest that genetics can play a role in your inflammation too. When we're born with gut bacteria that comes from our mothers. And if our mother may have been sick or had chronic inflammation, then we may not end up with a whole lot of healthy gut bacteria. And that lack of healthy gut bacteria can also contribute to inflammation. So not only do we have the DNA or the genetic component, but we have a gut bacteria situation that is delivered to us upon birth, and is also driven by our environment. And I think that's why often you see family members struggling with similar health conditions, because they're in the same environment, they're eating the same food, they're living the same lifestyle. And so often you see a child and a parent struggling with the same conditions. Now, you may also see one person in the family really struggling, and you may have the other members of the family doing just fine. And that's just because their bodies may be more resilient for some reason. Okay, so we all have this individual resilience. What is going to affect our level of inflammation is going to be different for everybody, but those are always the places that I start looking when I'm looking to address inflammation. And I would argue that having an anti-inflammatory diet as the foundation will allow you to handle all of these other things better and to reduce your inflammation overall. So I think that diet is the best place to start. So there's a lot of diets out there. There's a lot of options, a lot of buzz around what is the best diet to address inflammation in the body. So I want to give you just a few tips on how to structure your diet to really help you reduce that inflammation. The first step to doing that through diet is to remove inflammatory foods. Now, this can be different for everyone. Your inflammatory foods may be different from somebody else's inflammatory foods. But I would always start with ingredients that you can't pronounce and sugar. So if you're going to take anything out, those are the things to really focus on in the beginning. Because if you cannot pronounce that ingredient, you don't know what it is. And it's probably a chemical that is going to create inflammation in your body. And let me just tell you a little story about sugar. I had a client whose husband owned a trucking company, and they had to go to a sugar factory to pick up sugar. And do you know that they were literally driving on the sugar in the factory and picking up the sugar and putting it into their trucks for delivery? That then goes in your food. So it goes beyond just sugar, but it's like, what is that sugar actually being exposed to? Is it being run over by tires? Is it in a locked facility with exhaust fumes? That might be why it is so inflammatory. So I always recommend just cutting out any refined processed sugars. In my approach, I always allow maple syrup and honey and maybe a little bit of coconut sugar if you need to, but those natural sugars that are generally unrefined are going to be less inflammatory. All right. Now, the reason that diets like paleo, carnivore, vegan, why some of those will work is because they have removed potentially inflammatory foods. Now, in a lot of cases, those are overly restrictive. I hear a lot about, how the carnivore diet works. And I have to say, it's probably because they've also removed inflammatory foods like dairy and gluten. Okay. For a lot of people, those are problematic foods. They're either not well digested because we don't have the right enzymes for them, or again, they have been exposed to chemicals in the process of being grown and then harvested and processed. And so those can tend to increase inflammation, or at least when we remove them, we see improvements with inflammation. And so things like the carnivore diet and the paleo diet, they can be really helpful for eliminating inflammation. However, they may not be sustainable for everybody. And that's why I like to give people some other options that might be more sustainable, because we really want to make sure that your diet is as inclusive as possible and that you have a variety of foods to choose from. So a ketogenic diet, again, it takes out gluten. You may still have dairy in there, but eliminating that gluten might really help. So sometimes it's not about what you are eating, it's about what you're not eating. And you're probably not eating much junk food. You're eating fewer processed foods in that keto diet or that carnivore diet. but is that sustainable for the rest of your life? I want to set people up with a diet that they can then do potentially forever, and I would say 80 to 90% of the time. It's not always going to be perfect, but I want you to be able to do that forever in order to prevent chronic disease. Okay, so again, after we take out unpronounceable foods and chemicals, we take out sugar, maybe then your next step is removing gluten and dairy. And I say that knowing full well that is much easier said than done. Okay, so the best way to look at that removal of those foods is to actually look at what's left. What can you still eat, and really focus on those foods? Okay, when we take out gluten and dairy, we still have lots of animal proteins for all the B vitamins and the zinc and the minerals and the nutrients that we need to reduce inflammation. So focus on high quality proteins, quarter to a third of your plate. Then I want you to add and incorporate fruits and vegetables and even some whole grains. Depending on the person, you might find you don't tolerate whole grains very well. Whole grains are maybe gluten-free oats or rice or maybe quinoa. Those are some grains that people typically do better with when it comes to anti-inflammatory diets. So those may fit. For some people, they may not fit, at least not right away. But I would try to include those in the diet, again, for sustainability. And then we have our healthy fats, which would include things like avocados, nuts and seeds, olive oil. Olive oil is so beneficial. It has antiviral properties, antibacterial properties, and in places in Europe, they actually just use that as medicine. I've heard some gut health experts from Europe say, if you have a gut problem, you should be drinking olive oil. And I've often recommended that for my clients. Having some healthy oils can be helpful for constipation, but again, also it's just helping address any kind of inflammation in the gut. Okay, so including those healthy oils along with high quality proteins and fruits and vegetables is really the ideal diet for inflammation in the body. Now, let's say you've done all of that. You have really cleaned up your diet. Maybe you're doing kind of a Mediterranean style diet or a paleo diet that doesn't really include sugar, has eliminated things like corn and gluten and dairy, and you're still feeling bad. You're still having symptoms of inflammation. Those symptoms could be GI issues, could be migraines, headaches, eczema, psoriasis, any number of symptoms that you have could be inflammatory, food-related symptoms. So if you're still having those after you have done all of this, that's when we might need to dig in and identify the trigger foods that you have. Now, in my 8 years of doing food sensitivity testing as a functional dietitian, I have found that even if it's a super healthy food, you can still be reacting to it. Personally, I'm reactive to turmeric, and that is an anti-inflammatory spice that is in a ton of anti-inflammatory supplements. People use it in their food to reduce inflammation. For me, it causes inflammation. So when you do food sensitivity testing, you're really able to identify your best foods. Okay, so beyond the gluten and the dairy and the sugar and the unpronounceable foods, if you've cleared all of that out and you're still experiencing inflammation, doing food sensitivity testing will give you a list of what I call safe foods or your best foods to really build your diet on. So if you're interested in that, I always share on my website. It's I use MRT, mediator release test is the test that I use. And then we follow up with something called the LEAP diet protocol, which is really designed to reduce your inflammation. In the first 2 weeks, we limit your foods to foods we know are safe for you based on your test results. We don't add in any new foods. We really focus on those test results. And in that time, I often see people reduce their symptoms by anywhere from 30 to 60 to 75%. I don't make any promises about what somebody is going to experience, but it's the best when you see those results immediately. And I would say 2 weeks is pretty quick to see those results, because you need to see results in order to commit to that kind of diet change. Now, again, you could have to take out foods that are otherwise pretty healthy. I've had clients who are very healthy, healthy according to our standards. They were maybe eating all salads, loading up on fruits and vegetables, but they were still having symptoms. And then when we tested them, we found out they were actually sensitive to 12 different vegetables. And yes, that happens. I've had the cattle farmer who was sensitive to beef. I've had the vineyard owner who was sensitive to grapes and sulfites. So sometimes it's those things that you're consuming all the time that you are reacting to, which is why you just don't see the improvements that you would want when you're making these changes. Okay, so we sort of have a good, better, and best option for the best diet for inflammation in the body. Your good diet for inflammation in the body, again, is to take out that sugar and to really focus on whole foods. Avoid those chemicals, avoid those ingredients that you can't pronounce. A better option would to then be take out the gluten and dairy, in addition to that, and really see how that decreases your inflammation. And then your best diet for inflammation in the body is to do food sensitivity testing, which would then allow you to be very specific in your diet. It would take the guesswork out of what works for you and what doesn't, because what works for you may not work for somebody else. And so when we do any of these three things, we then allow the body to start healing the inflammation. We allow it to turn off that autoimmune switch that's gotten stuck in the on position. That's what's happening. That autoimmune switch is stuck on, and your body's producing inflammation to heal, heal, heal. But instead, you're just feeling bad. It's not healing. So what we need to do is switch that to the off position so that the body can then do the heavy lifting and heal itself. I always say the body wants to be healthy. You just have to put it in the right condition. You have to put it in the right environment. And starting with diet is absolutely the best place that you can start. Because once you start feeling better, because you're eating the right foods for you, you'll start to sleep better. You'll start to manage stress better. And you will have reduced your toxic burden, which allows you to handle other environmental triggers a little bit better. So one of the side effects of doing this is that you might have improvement in your allergies. You might have fewer environmental allergens. You might find that your asthma improves, or whatever allergy symptoms you were having get better. And in some cases, I've had people who have realized that their whole lives, they thought they had seasonal allergies, but really they just had food sensitivities, which can really mimic some of those seasonal allergies with the runny nose and the postnasal drip, or, sneezing. All of that can resolve through food. Okay. There is that potential there. And so if you have inflammation in the body, the best place to start is diet, because you will experience a domino effect throughout. You will see the benefits go throughout all of the other triggers for inflammation. And once we start with that, you'll want more. Okay. You'll want to make other lifestyle changes that help you improve. And that's something that I do with a lot of my clients. Again, I've been doing food sensitivity testing and focused on anti-inflammatory diets for 7 or 8 years now. So I've worked with a lot of clients, and I can tell you that when you experience quick results like this, you don't want to go back to your old way of eating. And that's beautiful. I mean, that's just what you want, is you want to be on a quote diet that you can do forever. Okay. So this is like the anti-diet diet, the anti-inflammatory diet that is not a diet. It is just your new normal. So if you would like to learn more of that, I'm always available to set up a strategy call to talk about what your next steps may be. I don't recommend food sensitivity testing for everybody. I really like to understand somebody's health history. I like to know where you've been and what your goals are before I make that recommendation. But we certainly have that option of food sensitivity testing. An easier barrier to or easier entry point is the Faster Way to Fat Loss program. That's a great place to start because we really focus on lifestyle. We focus on a gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free diet. And I give you the meal plans. I give you the recipes to use so that it takes the guesswork out of it. You don't have to think about how am I going to avoid gluten? It's all right there. You've got what you need. You've got your grocery list and you can do that. So there's a couple different options for you, but if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to discuss your own health conditions and learn a little bit more about the best diet for you to reduce inflammation in the body, I am happy to set up that strategy call. Just go to my website at Stacie, Stacieh, nutrition.com. You'll find me there. You can email me. You can look at my calendar there, and we will get started just as soon as you're ready. All right, folks, I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you have peace in your heart and that you are inspired to eat healthy after listening to this podcast. Take care.